we start looking at something like, you know, so if I pull on this box with this force, it's clear, it's easy to figure out the direction of friction on this box from this pulling force. It's going to try and oppose the motion of the box against the surface. So it shouldn't be too challenging to figure out that the frictional force will have to be this way, because the box is trying to be stopped by the frictional force. It's trying to oppose the box from sliding across the surface. I think your question isn't about that, and you're having a difficult time articulating it because you want to know why or how to deal with the fact that, not that, how to deal with the situation where there's more than one box trying to be accelerated through frictional force. Now, this situation doesn't.
When there's like friction on the table.
I get you, but the blue box is the one that you're having issues with. You're not having issues with the bottom box. You're having issues with the interface between the blue box and the white box. So, what direction is the blue box going to go? Should there be friction between the blue box and the white box?
See, because like I'm thinking if the white box is being pulled, that the blue box would fall like backwards that way, so the friction's gonna go right.
The only reason the blue box would go backwards is if the friction wasn't strong enough to pull it with the box underneath it.
Okay.
I mean, grab something in your room. Pull on the bottom part of it. See if the top part stays or goes. If it goes with it, something had to pull it to the right or pull it to the direction you pulled. So there is nothing in contact with this box that can pull to the right except for the possibility of a frictional force.
Okay.
Because it's the only thing that can act sideways on the box. So if I pull this bottom box to the right, the top box will only go with it if there's a force this way on the top box. And the only force that could act in that direction, based on the arrangement here, aside from maybe magic, would be friction. Because it's the only force that is attempting to prevent this top box from sliding, it's trying to prevent it from sliding backwards.
Okay.
So friction is going to act forwards to keep it attached to the bottom box. Now, you can't have one force without another.
Right.
So if I'm going to have a force in this direction on the top box that's coming from the bottom box, there's also got to be a force in this direction, known as equal in magnitude and opposite in direction, because they are a Newton's third law pair. So these frictional forces we're talking about, they're trying to prevent one surface from sliding past the other. That doesn't dictate the direction. The direction is whatever it will try and keep the surfaces from sliding. So a force in this direction on this box tries to keep that box from sliding off the bottom box. If that force wasn't there or wasn't strong enough, then the bottom box would slide out from underneath it.
So that's like the example when like when you say they slip off each other, they're going at different accelerations, and is that what's going to cause them to slip off one another?
Well, yeah, if I pull hard enough on the bottom box, I'll break static friction. And that's going to mean the two boxes won't move with the same acceleration. That doesn't mean they won't both move forwards. It just means that one of them is going to increase speed faster than the other one moving forwards. So they both have an acceleration in this direction, but probably this one's is not as big as that one's. So they both move to the right, but the top box doesn't stay in contact with the bottom box.
Okay, that definitely clears a lot up.
Oh, I'm glad that's true.
I have a question just about part B from the quiz today. So I almost got the correct answer, but when I was looking at the box on the top and like the forces in the x direction, I did tension minus like friction 1 minus friction 2, but in the answer there's only friction sub 2. I'm just wondering why we don't like consider the friction between the two boxes.
The part B of the quiz, the two boxes we are told move together with the same acceleration. Because of that, that's ugly. Because of that, we can treat both of the boxes that are on the table as one big box of mass M1 plus mass M2. Because they move together. We're told that they move together. We're told that they stay in contact with each other. But let's say that you weren't sure about that, and you didn't know how to deal with that, and you wanted to just use the methods that we've been talking about earlier this year. Then when I look at that top box, it's still only going to have one force to the right, friction, acting on it. And that's the only force that's causing it to accelerate to the right. And that frictional force is going to be equal to M1A. The bottom box is going to have this tension this way, friction from the surface, and friction from the top block. So when I consider the block 2, I'll put friction from the surface and friction from the top block. Then the net force on it's going to be tension minus the friction from the top block minus the friction from the surface, and that's going to equal M2A, right? So right away, I noticed that these two frictional forces are the same. So before I even consider this box over here, I could substitute and I'll get tension minus M1A minus the friction from the surface equals M2A. That frictional force is an internal force. It cancels out, and I'm going to be left with tension minus friction from the surface equals the combined mass of both boxes times A, which is just like saying I have one big box that has mass M1 plus M2, and all I have to worry about is the friction on the bottom. It's because we're told in the beginning of the question that they move together with the same acceleration, and that's why we can kind of jump to that. But you can treat it as two separate boxes, but that frictional force is going to act in opposite directions on both, and it will cancel out. You're welcome. All right, let's let an AP1 kid get a word in edgewise. They got a test tomorrow, so they're all jonesing for something.
I was wondering if you could briefly go over how you would expect us to answer some of the questions on the practice test that you gave us. The one that you gave us research.
Oh. Well, I just got home a few minutes ago, so I would be happy to, but there's probably people who are wondering what the hell you're talking about. So, and this is because Adam McMillan asked me for a question that was something else to work on to practice. So I did not have an organized intention of doing another practice test. So all of you who are hearing about it and are in tutoring, just be aware I was just trying to be nice. And as punishment, I'm probably going to hear about the fact that I gave it to some people and not others. So keep it in mind that before you punish me with that, I was just trying to be nice. So I am posting it as an announcement. So if you want a copy of it, run to Canvas and there'll be a copy of it there in just a minute. It is going to take me a second because, like I said, I've been home all of 15 minutes. Alrighty. Alrighty, so sent that off. So all of you in AP1, you can go grab it real quick so you know what it is we're talking about. All right, so I'm assuming you guys are looking at it right now, those of you who wanted the answers to it. I foresee on your test tomorrow a whole page of something like this. And my expectation is you should be able to discuss with me without using equations or anything else this information that is presented here. That's what this is about. So, comes by the practice. And I've basically just created a couple of varieties or different scenarios here that have to do with the this weight being hung off the edge of a table. And it doesn't look like it's actually updating my screen, so I've got to start and stop the share again. So there we go. There we go. So the first thing it says, in this example, all the strings are massless and the pulleys have no friction or mass either. And again, I just whipped this together, so I don't know how great this is going to be. There's probably lots of things here I want you to be able to do, but it might not be perfect. So I'll make adjustments as we go to kind of tell you how I think it's good for the test and how I think it's probably not great for the test. So the first thing I do want to point out is that, I am expecting you guys to be able to make some rational judgments about what's happening in these problems. Without having to necessarily throw down a whole bunch of equations and stuff, you need to be thinking about the concept of inertia, the concept of Newton's second law, and how it affects a system of objects. And my expectation is that you can make large considerations without having to break down and try and write out equations. And this is an example of what I mean by that. So it says a block is hung on one side of the table and is attached to another block that is clamped to the table. The mass of the block hanging off the table is M. What can be said about the tension in the cable? That one should be easy. That the tension in the cable is equal to the weight of the block. And you should be able to explain why you know that to be true. And I don't want to write a whole bunch of sentences here. So I'm kind of counting on you guys to be, if you're here for tutoring, I assume you're highly motivated and you want kind of the answers here. But I really think you need to try and do some internalization. If the block doesn't move, the upward force of tension on the block has to be equal to the weight of the block. That seems pretty standard, pretty simple. So the reason why the tension in the cable is the weight of the block is because the net force is 0. I wouldn't say just that, because you know that in class, saying the net force is 0 doesn't tell you anything. But you do have to say that if the net force is 0 and the only two forces are tension and weight, they have to be equal and opposite. So that's kind of where I'd be starting. by considering specifically what's happening to the block related to the cable. Now, the next question is designed specifically to see if you're really paying attention or if you're only paying attention marginally. There are a group of students who believe that if I replace the clamp with another hanging block, that since the cable is supporting 2 blocks, the tension in the cable now must be twice the weight. That seems like a reasonable argument because the cable has to support 2 different boxes, so it must be twice the weight. And that would be 100% wrong. Although I bet I get that answer on the test, perhaps even from 1 or 2 of you. Jeffrey, Mariana, I don't tutor students who don't have the cameras on. I find it to be disrespectful. I'm not saying you're disrespectful, I just want to see faces. So, it's important to realize that just because there's 2 blocks there doesn't mean that somehow the tension in the cable is any different. I still focus on 1 block and only 1 block when I'm considering what's going on with the cable. We don't ever consider the cable as a whole. We've never made a free body diagram for the cable. We've only made free body diagrams for individual objects. So this 1 block on one side can tell us the answer to the tension in the cable. We don't have to know why the block isn't moving. Whether it's the clamp from the prior example or the fact that I have a counterbalancing weight, none of that matters. When I'm told that the blocks stay at rest, then the net force is 0 still. And that means the tension in the cable has to be equal to the weight of 1 of the blocks. Again, it doesn't matter that this cable is holding 2 blocks. The tension in the cable is still based on what happens right there. Or I could, if you want, consider right there, and I'd still get the same answer that the tension in the cable is going to be equivalent to the weight of 1 block. Guarantee one of you screws that up tomorrow, though. Now, the real test of that is to tap the system. The left block is given a tap, so it begins to move upward. How does this affect the tension in the cable found in the previous example? And describe the motion of the system. Have any of the forces changed after the tap? That's the important question. And the answer is nothing has changed, except that now the system is going to move at a constant velocity. The masses are all the same, so the force on the system hasn't changed. The fact that it's moving at a constant velocity means the net force is 0. And because the net force is 0, the tension in the cable remains the weight of just 1 of the blocks. You're noticing, I hope, a consistent theme. That I keep going back to what's happening to a single block and applying Newton's first or second law to it. It's the same theme we've had for the last 3 weeks. I'm going to try and confuse that on the test tomorrow. I'm going to try and force you into a position where you're trying to think of everything that's happening, all the elements of the system that are moving, to distract you from just looking at one thing at a time. So you have to resist that urge to somehow find the thing to be bigger than it actually is. None of the masses have changed. If none of the masses have changed, then the net force on the system is still going to be 0. So the tension in the cable is going to be equal to the weight of 1 of the blocks. The fact that it's moving just means it moves at a constant velocity and doesn't accelerate. That's the big deal. It won't accelerate. Now, we move on with this. The blocks are brought to rest, and the block on the right is replaced with a block with twice the mass. of the block on the left. All right, so now we're getting somewhere. We have block M and a block 2M. Does this increase or decrease the tension? This word here, derive, means that this now changes from being a problem that is about talking your way through the solution to a problem where you have to demonstrate from a first principle what the solution is. So that's going to make a difference. I'm expecting at this point that there's going to be, free body diagrams and things of that nature. And I'm specifically being told that the block on the right is replaced with the heavier one. So when I go back to my picture over here, let's consider what this means for a derivation. This block is 2M, and this block is M. Now, the fact that there's all this table in between, ignore it. It's just a way to space out the cable. This problem is actually the same as a single pulley with a block on either side. It's exactly the same. The fact that it's on a table, it's just because it's a table. Don't be confused by that. There's really no difference between them. So when I consider what I'm going to do, I'm going to address direction first because I think the system's going to go that way, right? Reasonably. Don't you think the heavier one's going to go down and the lighter one's going to go up? Now, there's a part of me that thinks the tension in the cable is going to get greater because there's more weight being hung. That seems like a reasonable argument, even before I start deriving it. But there's also the part of me that says, but the system is accelerating, so I better be careful, because as soon as things start to accelerate, it gets a little weird. So I don't want to just take it at face value, and I don't want to assume. They want a derivation. I'm going to give them a derivation. So this side, I'm expecting a downward force of 2mg, while this side, a downward force of mg. I am specifically making the 2mg arrow twice as big as the mg arrow. I am going to do that tomorrow. Be prepared to be careful. I don't know how big the tension is, but I know it's got to be between these two, because this tension has to be less than 2mg, so it accelerates downwards. And the tension on the other side has to be the same size, but it has to be bigger than mg to accelerate that mass upwards. Now that alone tells me that the tension is greater than the weight of one of the blocks, because it has to be enough to accelerate that block upwards, but not so much that it prevents the 2mg block from accelerating downwards. So that answers the question, but the question wanted a derivation, so we're going to continue. These two tensions have to be the same. They are Newton's third law. And both blocks have to have the same acceleration because the system is connected together. So, starting with the 2m block, I'm going to have Newton's second law, net force equals 2ma. A lot of you guys forget this too. You put net force equals ma and you forget that the mass was twice the mass of m. So don't make that mistake. It's a silly mistake. You're not going to lose too many points, but you really don't want to make that mistake because it's going to make you feel silly when we grade the test. That's going to be, though, 2mg minus tension equals 2ma. The other block has tension up and weight down, and up is positive for this block, so tension minus weight equals ma. Now, we want to, we want to take this and add it to the other equation. So, we're adding this equation to this equation. That's going to eliminate t. So I'm going to take and just write TMG equals MA, and then add them together. On the other side of the equal sign, I got 3MA. 2M plus 1M is 3M. On the left side, those T's go away. And I'm left with 2mg minus mg equals 3ma. Now, finishing this derivation, I'm going to get mg equals 3ma, so a is 1/3 of g. What's up, babe?
I just want attention.
Huh?
Do you like teaching?
I'm tutoring.
Oh.
There's a test tomorrow, so
That sucks.
yeah, it's a physics test too, so it's really gonna suck.
You want me to motivate them and tell them what I just got on my quiz?
You guys want to hear what an engineer just got on their quiz? You don't.
Engineering sucks.
Engineering is bad. What'd you get on your quiz, babe?
2 out of 10.
What?
But that's without partial credit. I definitely got higher than that.
Engineering is brutal.
It's the worst.
Actually, my oldest daughter's just a crappy student.
Yeah, you're right.
Bye, daughter. We love it when they come to visit. Actually, we do. I don't want her to go away. I'd be okay if they just lived with us forever, but that would make me a bad parent, so I have to let them go. Sometimes they're easier to let go than others. Right now, she's really easy to let go. She's eating my food in my house, taking up my space, and she keeps playing these songs on our Siri connected devices that I really don't want to hear. One of them is about some wet thing, and I don't want to hear that song anymore. So I know what it means. I know what the letters are.
Waffles and pancakes.
It's not waffles and pancakes. It's really not witches and pumpkins. And it's not wet as pumpkins either. But we're getting closer, aren't we? Yes, yes. So I get quite the education from them, So, anyways, let's face it, you needed a bit of a break from this physics garbage. We're all tired of it, I know. Classes like this. Probably if you had a better teacher, you wouldn't have to come to tutoring so much. But I'm sorry, you guys, you're just stuck with me. This is all I got. So, all right, so we're partway through our derivation, and we're enjoying the hell out of this, aren't we? Yes, we are. There's not much left. You do need to say, the reason why the M's are all canceling out is because I made the one mass twice as big as the other mass. That's why they canceled out. That's why. The fact that the acceleration is 1/3 of g, that's great. That doesn't mean anything. It's just a value. It's a number. But we need it because we need to figure out what the tension was. Remember, this whole thing was to figure out what the tension was and prove whether it was the same as before, less than before, or greater than before. That's what we're doing. So I can find the tension in two different places. I can find it here, or I can find it here. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Pick the easy one. And so I'm thinking this is the easy one. Easy as they come. So I get T minus mg equals m times 1/3 g. So when I add this mg to the other side, parent, was that a parent? Was that Mariana's parent? I saw a parent. Brother? Sibling? Father? Sister? Friend? Stranger in your house? Stranger danger, call the police. Who knows? I'm just going to add it to the other side. So that's going to give me that the tension equals 4/3 g. No, 4/3 mg. I'm not scared of fractions. I'm sure you guys aren't either. That's the end.
Move it down.
What? Oh,
You just breathe it a little bit.
I got my volume turned all the way down, so I can't even hear you guys anymore. My neighbor's blasting some music, so I'm chilling to that. Just so you know. So it's kind of messy. I wasn't trying to be real neat, and then my daughter interrupted me, and I'm a little tired, and my foot really hurts. But this is it right there. The tension's greater than the weight now. Not by much, just a little bit. But we proved it. The original tension was mg. We proved it using a derivation. This is tough stuff, and I don't, I'm not going to back away from it, but, this is the kind of stuff I think that's hard, because it just looks like a lot of letters and numbers and stuff and doesn't always seem to correlate with what we're doing. But you have to understand, I'm trying to get you to mix both ideas in your head, both being able to explain yourself verbally, but also being able to side shift into a mathematical derivation. I believe the AP exam is going to really be pressing that kind of narrative. So, any questions about that? Fantastic. So I'm going to scroll up. We got to be getting, wow, I just kept throwing in more stuff. So here's this next one. Now a block of 3M. Very imaginative, Mr. Shelton. 3M, 2M, M. Is placed on a table between the two blocks from above. Assume the friction is negligible between the block and the table. Are the tensions in the cables the same? Explain your reasoning using clear, articulate argument. Well, let me just ask you all something. There's no friction on the table. Do you think the system is going to accelerate? The answer to that question is critical, because if you can't answer that question, you're not going to be able to answer what's being asked of you. You're not going to be able to explain your reasoning. And I'm going to be honest with you. You need to do a little soul searching here. Can you reasonably understand that this system has to accelerate this way? There's an unbalanced force on the system. mg is pulling down on this side. 2mg is pulling down on that side. So it's unbalanced. Although this block is much heavier than the other two, there's no friction, so the force here is going to have to be greater than the force here. So the tension on this side, the tension on the right, will have to be greater than the tension on the left so that the system can accelerate. The only way this block in the middle moves along with the system is that the forces on it are unbalanced. And the only forces that can cause that block to move are the tension forces. So the tension in the right string will be greater than the tension in the left string. I think a lot of students are going to say the tensions are the same. But the moment we put that block in the middle, we added inertia to the system. And because we added inertia to the system, the forces on that block have to be uneven to accelerate it. By the way, for those of you who think, if I ask, say, a follow-up, like what's the acceleration of the system? I think a lot of you believe you're going to be starting an entire new problem from scratch. But you're not. You guys have got to start coming to grips with the idea that net force equals MA. The net force is the fact that there's 2mg on one side and mg on the other. We just did this. If I scroll up here, that's exactly what we saw right there. The net force was one force on one side subtracted from the other force on the other. It equaled the total mass of the system, 2m plus 3m. So if you're, somebody asked, they were a little mad because I said that the best you could do if you finished the problems in class yesterday was probably a B. That's because right here, without any derivation, without having to start all over, I'm expecting that the kid who wants an A can say that, well, yeah, this is going to be m plus 2m plus 3m times A. This is how much mass has to be accelerated. The forces that were hung off the side haven't changed. So those are still the unbalanced force part. But I suddenly added a lot more mass. So I don't expect it to be too hard for you to say, okay, it's like 1/5 of G. Although it's not 1/5, it's 1/6. Because apparently Mr. Shelton can't add. But 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6, not 5. So that's what I'm looking for in this problem. I expect that for you guys to do this problem completely, it's going to be about 15, maybe 18 minutes. You're going to have between 10 and 15 multiple choice questions. I'm expecting those to take you about 15 minutes. And then you're going to have a force problem, a ramp, a Atwood machine, or a modified Atwood machine. And it's likely going to have, friction involved with it too. If you want to really know where the sweet spot is, and I'm not trying to fool you, I've written 3 different questions, so I don't know which one you're going to get. But consider, on this test, I want to test all of the information about forces. So every single problem that I'm going to give tomorrow, whether it's a ramp, whether it's a modified Atwood machine or a regular Atwood machine, has got to have more than one object. It's got to have an internal force that connects the 2 objects. And it's got to have some reference to friction, using the word coefficient of friction. That ensures I've covered everything. There's probably a part of the problem where the net force is 0, and probably a part of the problem where the net force is unbalanced. If I can do that in one problem, I've covered the gamut of our material. And just between us, because you guys know how to keep a secret, actually I really don't care if you tell everybody. Who are you going to tell? It's almost 9 o'clock. Well, I don't know. You guys might stay up late. Sometimes you guys are submitting stuff at like 2 a.m., but I don't need to put trig in there to screw you over. So while the incline is nice, a lot of you just screw up because it's an incline. And giving you forces and angles is nice, but a lot of you just get screwed up because you can't do sine and cosine. I don't want my test to be about trig. I want my test to be about physics. So to me, a modified Atwood machine gives me the most possibility of getting out of you what I want, with a mixture of short answer responses and then some actual mathematics. So like this question is a good example of that. So you should imagine that although I have written questions that have all these things in it, I want to focus and I want to make sure I'm getting out of you this concept of unbalanced force and inertia. That's about it. I've answered the question and then talked around it a lot. So is there a follow-up to this? Awesome. So I can hit pause.